an idea of what we're going to be covering. So basically today we're going to talk about the difference between literacy and digital literacies. We will categorize the digital literacies, or some of the digital literacies that there are. Then we will reflect on why it is important to teach digital literacies in ELT. And last but not least, I will try to give you a few ideas of how to help students develop their digital literacies in class. So this is the plan for today. It's quite ambitious, so let's try to cover everything. First, to start, I would like to ask you two questions. The first one is, what is basic literacy? And the second one is, what is digital literacy? So can you write your answers in the chat box, please? Right, so Gabriela wrote, basic literacy, read, write. That's it. What about digital literacy? Any volunteers? Don't be shy. Okay, digital, knowing how to deal with Zoom, yes. Use of basic tech, knowing how to use devices to teach, know how to use digital tools, yes. The skills or abilities to use various digital tools, very good. We have lots of interesting answers here. If you want to continue contributing your answers, you're welcome to do so. But let's see what we have here. So as you said, basic literacy involves reading, writing, and also the use of arithmetic, right? So here we're talking about the 3 R's that students learn. But nowadays, we know that knowing how to read, write, and doing simple mathematics is not enough anymore. We want our students to be able to do more. And the concept of digital literacy encompasses accessing knowledge through technology and assessing complex contexts. So students have to be able to do more than reading and writing. They have to know where to find information, how to do these things through technology, and they also have to be able to assess the quality they find. This is quite a lot to expect from our students, but this is the challenge that life poses anyways. So then when we talk about basic literacy and digital literacy together, we are talking about literacy. So what is the meaning of being literate nowadays? It's not just knowing how to read and write, but it means having both basic literacy, which is being able to perform the 3 R's, but also being digitally literate. So this is definitely something we want our students to develop. We want students develop. Then, therefore, when we're talking about literacy nowadays, we're language, numbers, images, computers, and other basic means to understand, communicate, and gain useful knowledge. So what we do here is we add a number of other components to the concepts of literacy that we have. And we extrapolate that initial concept of language and numbers to images, computers, and other basic means, right? And then the question is, but how do we implement all of this in class, in our teaching? And this is the $1 million question here. So let's start by talking about digital literacy. When we talk about digital literacy, we're not really talking about a single concept. here we're talking about a number of different literacies that students can or need to develop. So we're talking about a number of literacies that we can teach our students. So my next question to you would be, what digital literacies do you think we can help our students develop in ELT? Can you write your answers in the chat box? So if you remember, when we talked about digital literacy, we talked about accessing information, uh, assessing information, using the computer. So what can we teach our students in ELT? So here, Gabriela said how to navigate the internet and find reliable information. This is definitely a key skill we want to help our students develop. Yes, trustworthy sources like Adriana Salvanini wrote, mute, unmute themselves, how to share the screen, how to use an online dictionary, sources, chat box. Yes, researching and checking if info is true and relevant, how to use an online dictionary. Yes, yes, yes. So many people talking about checking relevance and the source of information in this in these times of fake news and everything. This is definitely something we want to help our students develop. So here we have some of the digital literacies we can talk about are search literacy. Then we also have information literacy, tagging literacy, hypertext literacy, remix literacy, and mobile digital literacy. So all of these are digital literacies that we can help our students class in ELT lessons. But what do they mean? Many of them, what does search literacy mean? Well, it means helping our students search for information. However, some other literacies are not so self-explanatory, like tagging literacy. What could that be? Or remix literacy. What could that be? So here we have the first one, search literacy, which is one of the self-explanatory literacies, means learning how to search or learning how to learn. We know that nowadays, when we think about our current students and our role as teachers, we are not the only providers of knowledge anymore. So perhaps we might even dare say that students do not need us to find information because information is available everywhere. They can use the internet. They have this, at a touch of a finger with their cell phones. They have their laptop computers most of the time. It's easy to find information nowadays, or information is available nowadays, but do our students really know how to find information, how to search information, and how to dig to find what they need? So this is perhaps what we have to do. Our role therefore changes from providing them with the information they need to helping them learn how to find the information they need. Or in other words, how to help them, we help them become more independent. So here, when we're thinking about teaching search literacy, we're talking about teaching students how to find keywords, how to use different search engines, how to use research strategies, how to parse the information they find, how to dig deeper. Let me give you an example. If you're teaching your students about I don't know, global warming, and you want them to find some information about global warming because you're going to use this in class, preparing them for a writing activity or for a speaking activity. So if you want them to find information about this, is it enough just to ask them to go to Google and find whatever they need to find? I don't think it is. I think before that, something we as language teachers can do is help them think of the keywords they are going to use in the search engine. And this can be done via brainstorm, for instance. We can ask them, look, you have to find information about global warming. What kind of words are you going to look for when you go to Google? Or what kind of um, sentence are you going to write to look for the information you want? The second question is, do they have to use Google? Because when we think about searching, we inherently start thinking about Google, but many times Google is not the best option for them to find what they have to find. And there are many reasons why this is. So first of all, Google's primary answer is going to be Wikipedia. So whenever you look for something in Google, it will redirect you to Wikipedia. And as teachers, we want students to have a wealth of different sources when you're looking for information. Yes, another reason why we might want to experiment with different search engines is that whenever we use Google, it registers our search preferences. So there is a tendency that it will send us to the same links over and over again. For instance, if you like cooking and you look for recipes often on the internet, it will always send you to the same recipe websites because the system understands that you like those websites, that this is your profile. So here, something that might be helpful is teaching students how to use different search engines that require different strategies, and then research strategies, how to parse information. Okay, they look for global warming and they bump into, I don't know, 100 entries. So how do they click on something that is going to be relevant to them? Because they're not going to read everything or all the websites they find. So they need to be able to look at those descriptions they find under each website to be able to decide what they want to find, or to decide if they should click on something or not, right? And also they should be able to know when the information they found was enough and when the information they found needs supplementation. So a few activities that we can use with students here would be, so showing them different search engines. So you don't have to show Google only. You can assign them the engines they're going to use. So you're going to use Google, you're going to use Bing, you're going to use DuckDuckGo, you're going to use, I don't know, you name it. And then you have different students use different search engines to compare their answers and see if they have similar results. We can do some brainstorming to help them consider how they're going to do the search they have to do. We can work with reading some skills, scanning. They may have to scan the words in the descriptions and decide which website they would click, for instance. This makes for a great reading lesson. Using a list of results that search and have students scan key information there to decide what would be worth clicking or not. So we may have them explain why they would click on one of the links or not, and this would make for a great speaking activity in which they would train persuasion and discourse markers, their critical thinking. So lots of things that would be developed as a byproduct of analyzing a Google search, right? So these are some of the ideas that you can implement in class. The next digital literacy that we could think about is information literacy. And that means learning to evaluate information online critically. I think that this literacy could be even called fake news literacy, because this is what we are really confronted with every day. So we are bombarded with information. We get WhatsApp messages, we see things on TV, we read things on the internet, there's advertisements, um, it's too much information. But how do we know if the information that comes to us is valid or not, is good or not, is true or not? If as teachers, it is sometimes to make that assessment, let alone students. So this is one of the things we need to help them with, right? So here, what we need to teach them when it comes to information literacy is the basic grammar of the internet. So look, usually let's think about advertisements. Usually if there is something absurd with a catchy headline like, I don't know, lose 10 kilos in 5 days. It is appealing, but it's difficult to believe that. So is it likely to be true? We can get students to discuss their impressions about what they read, for instance. We can do some after the fact checking. So if we are working with this advertisement, for instance, okay, this advertisement says that you can lose 10 kilos in 5 days. It's a silly example, but anyways. Okay, now go to one of the search engines that we have and try to find if this is possible, if this is healthy, if this has been done by someone, if this has been studied, researched. We can help students do some research to support what they see on the internet as valid or not valid. We can have them create critical questions about that. So, okay, lose 10 kilos in 5 days. If you were to, I don't know, maybe buy this product or analyze this product, what kind of questions would you ask the person who's selling this product to know if this is a good product, a healthy product, or if it works? And this is something we can do with students too. Yes, and they come up with the questions, and they have to go and find the questions to the answers they created. We can have them triangulate information. Okay, this is good, valid, and true. Try to find this information somewhere else. Try to find other sources that provide the same kind of information. And then some activities we can do would be working with, for instance, spoof websites and bogus websites. We used to have here in Brazil Sensacionalista. I don't know if we still have that one, but that's a good example because we know that everything there has been, it's nothing of that is true. And that's a great example of bogus websites, spoof website, for students to analyze the genre of this kind of fake news. We can work with other materials, like I said, advertisements, but WhatsApp messages that we get, and this kind of thing, right? So here we can, as I told you, have students scrutinize websites. We can have them reflect on the plausibility of the information. They evidence and or contradictions for something they see. So if you see this, you need to go to the internet and find evidence to support this information, or you need to go to the internet and find evidence to contradict this information. We can have them differentiate facts from opinions. Okay, read the text. All of these 10 sentences appear in the text. Tell me if each of the sentences is a fact or if it represents the opinion of the author. It's a great reading activity and reading sub-skill we need to help our students develop if we want them to become more critical learners, more literate learners. So we can help them with associative thinking. We can help them see things from perspective by asking questions. We can help them and have them understand and identify information that is irrational, that doesn't make sense, or that is intolerant towards some um, beliefs or prejudicial. We can have them share and compare these in pairs, and this generates debate in class. We can prepare activities in which cognition, so they have to come up with answers and justifications on their toes without doing research. So critical power, as opposed to activities in which they would have to analyze information diligently and go to the internet to find things, or maybe talk to other teachers they have to assess the plausibility of information they find. Okay, good. Going to the third literacy, digital literacy that we can help our students develop, we have tagging literacy. And then I think that maybe the first words that comes to mind is hashtags, and using hashtags, and this has everything to do with tagging literacy, which has to do with learning to keep track of online content. This is helping our students get organized. So maybe we still do that, but in the past, when we started teaching a group of students, we would need to teach them how to get organized. So this is your notebook, this is where you're going to include this information. So here you have to write a heading, and then you have to write the topic of the lesson, and then you write on both pages. So have a file for you to keep all your handouts, basic organizational skills. And nowadays, as students use browsers and laptops, iPads, cell phones, how do they organize the information they have? How do they keep track of the content they produce and come across? We also have to teach them how to do that, because if we don't teach them, they're not going to learn how to do this. So as I said before, the content is available on the internet, but knowing how to organize this content has become one of the roles of the teachers to help students develop. Here I have two keywords that might be relevant when talking about tagging literacy, which are folksonomies and metadata. Folksonomies has to do with how you organize the information you find. For instance, if you have lots of favorites in your browser, this happens to me. For instance, I have thousands of favorites, and when I have to find what I want, I never find it because they're not organized into folders, for instance. So I could create a folksonomy in order to organize my links. That means I would create different folders, and then each folder would have a name, a topic, whatever. And this would be how I would know where to find things. So this can become an activity with your students. Okay, you have collected all this information. You have found all this information. How are you going to organize everything? How are you going to categorize everything? And creating the categories, so defining what the categories are and explaining what the categories are and justifying the relevance of the categories might be something we want to develop with students. So this folksonomy is something we want to develop with the students. Other things we can do is having students summarize texts using hashtags. So we know that whenever we use the function of a hashtag on the internet is to help people find information that is relevant to them. So a hashtag has to be something that summarizes the topic, and that would be how somebody would look for it. So we need to understand the key concepts, and also we need to be able to think of how people would search this information. So here there is, you know, a concoction between tagging literacy and search literacy. This becomes a great reading activity. Read the text and summarize it using hashtags. If someone wanted to find this text on the internet, what hashtags would they look for? We can have them share their bookmarks or their folksonomies for other activities. So, and of course, explain why they used these bookmarks, these folksonomies, etc. Moving on, we have the hypertext literacy, which means learning to process and use hyperlinks. And I say this is a new reading subskill because really, when you compare reading a text on paper to reading a text online, the experience is totally different. And many of the subskills that students have to use are different. For instance, if you're reading a book and you don't understand a word in the book, what do you have to do? So basically you have to, I don't know, you highlight the word and come back to it later, or you open a dictionary and try to find the meaning of the word so you can continue with your reading, or you try to understand the meaning of the word, you try to infer the meaning of the word by looking at the neighboring words. But basically that's how you deal with it. You need to develop the subskill of inferencing. But when you're reading a text online, all you have to do is, for instance, if you have a Kindle, is click on the word and it's going to show you what the meaning of the word is. So you don't need to use a dictionary. You don't need to infer the meaning of the word. You don't need to highlight it for later. It's there, it's easy, it's accessible. So when we are reading a text that contains hypertext, students need to be able to develop other subskills. So here, then, as I said, reading a text, a digital text is very different to reading a print-based text. And one of the main reasons is that the reading therefore becomes non-sequential. So think about reading a magazine, a gossip magazine. If you're reading a printed magazine, what you do is maybe you read one article and then there is the next one. If you want to read it, you do. If you don't want to read it, you don't, you skip it. But you pretty much read it linearly. If you're reading gossip on the internet, you start reading the situation. I don't know, this person is dating that person, but that person had an affair with that other person before. And then when it says had an affair with that other person before, there is already a hyperlink which you can click to become familiar with the story that happened before. And that goes on eternally. You know, we get caught in this loop because one piece of news has a hyperlink that redirects you to something else. And then what happens is the reading process becomes so interactive in that you don't read the text from beginning to end. You start reading a text and then it catches your attention and you're curious to know something else. And because you have the hyperlink, you can just click on it and you start reading something else to quench your curiosity. And the final text that you read is not the initial text that the author wrote. You end up reading a new text that you created based on your interests, because you start reading the text, then you click on a link, you read another paragraph in another text, and then you click on another hyperlink and read another paragraph in another text. So at the end, you read a lot. What I read is possibly not the same thing you would have read, and for some curiosities were different in the process. And the hyperlinks make this process more interactive. It's possible to make it more interactive. It becomes much more reader-centered. Yes, And in that sense, we become collaborators with the writer because we sort of decide on how the text is going to be organized. So as an activity here, what we have to do is help students decide on which hyperlinks they're going to click and why, so they don't get totally sidetracked and without focus. Yes? The next one would be the multimedia literacy, which means it is an extended understanding of basic literacy. Yes, because it's basically thinking about how we access, process, and use information. So here we are thinking about all the skills and competences and knowledge that we have to use technology. And this has to do with many of the things you mentioned in the websites before. Um, and here, it's something that we need to bear in mind is that we live in a media saturated society. So we are accessible 24/7 and we have access to information 24/7. Um, and that's the reality. So if you're curious about something, you're not going to wait for the next day. If you're doing your homework, for instance, and you want to know a word, wants to know an expression, you're not going to wait for the next lesson to ask the teacher. You are going to look for this. And knowing how to use all of these resources is important, because if we give students tips on how to, and tips and practice on how to do this, we help them become more autonomous. Um, so here, things we need to bear in mind when working with technology is making sure that students ask and answer critical questions about what they read, hear, and watch, that they can identify the purpose of the message that they are reading or of the material they are analyzing, that they can see the construction techniques, the different genres, that they examine the patterns of media representation, that they can detect propaganda in what they read and see and watch, censorship, that they understand media ownership, funding. So these are all ways of helping them become more critical. Therefore, teaching them multimedia literacy has to do to helping them become more critical thinkers, right? Then here we have literacy, which means learning to communicate novel ideas, identities, and rhetoric through refashioned, retooled, and repurposed cultural objects. Or, in other words, would be the maybe copy and paste literacy, to say the least. Copy and paste literacy, to make a comparison here. Because what happens is that students have access to lots of information nowadays. Podcasts, videos on YouTube, images on the internet, and all of these materials are available to them. So we need to teach our students how to use all the content they find online and offline to be able to express themselves. So how they can use videos, songs, podcasts, images to represent their ideas. So how they can recycle what they find to show their point of view. This is called remix literacy. So this has to do with copying and pasting, but also teaching our students how to source things correctly, how to give credit to what they find on the internet, which is a vital pedagogical tool. Because nowadays, intellectual property is an issue with the internet, because we have access to lots of information and proper credit not always is given. And we need to teach our students how to give credit when they rehash, rebrand, repurpose, or recycle information or other materials they collect from the internet. Okay? So here, as I said, notions of copyright and plagiarism. It gives them on student-centeredness because we give them an opportunity to show their points of view using other media they find online. And here we always have to bear in mind that it's easier to implement in some places than in others, where we have lots of censorship, for instance. The last digital literacy we're going to talk today is we're going to talk about today's mobile digital literacy, which means understanding of information, access, a mobile inflection of search literacy and information literacy, hyperconnectivity, and a new sense of space. So here, it has to do with the fact that we are connected 100% of the time, but that doesn't mean we should be available 100% of the time. And it's important to teach our students how to establish limits when they're using the internet, because we know that we are all hyper-connected, but we need to know how to establish the boundaries here. Right? So here, a few things to consider as teachers would be, we sometimes ask students to turn off their cell phones in class. Many times our belief that they should turn off their cell phones in times is the school policy for them to turn off their phones in class, but is it really the best thing to do, or should we be maximizing the fact that they have access to this and that there is, you know, a plethora of things they could do with that? So we need perhaps to revisit our myths and attitudes regarding mobile phones in class, because many times we believe that mobile phones are villains in terms of classroom management and engagement and motivation and attention, etc. But it needs not be the case. We might consider how to use this in class so as to keep students more motivated. Also, there is a tendency to believe that students develop a linguistic whateverism because of technology. That means, I don't know, abbreviating everything and not knowing how to spell things, not knowing how to operate in different registers. But this has been proven wrong already, because what research shows is that there is a strong correlation between text speak and standard literacy skills. In other words, the more, what research shows is that the more students text, the more they develop their standard literacy skills and reading comprehension, writing skills, etc. So that argument perhaps isn't that valid anymore, okay? And then just for us to wrap this up, a few ideas you can use in class would be, for instance, using WhatsApp, because I think it's one of the things that most students have. We can have them create emoji stories, emoji races, like I say something with this emoji and then someone has to reply, asking for the right pronunciation of words. We can send the word reading and the student records the word, or vice versa. Sentence dictation, we send them a recorded message and they have to type it. Miming, one student can record a message to another one and the other mimes and records it. They can make videos using verbs. For instance, if you're teaching the present continuous, you can have them make videos showing those sentences in the present continuous. We can have them record news, weather forecasts, etc. They can create a photo diary, an audio diary, a video diary. Presentations can be done via WhatsApp. They can record a tour guide, etc., etc. So there are many things we can do with WhatsApp. Okay, if you want, I can share you the slides with you later, and you can have all of these activities to try and experiment. So this is the list of references I used for this presentation, which is a quite interesting list, and if you want to have the presentation, you can send me an email and I can gladly share this with you. And my email, if you want to contact me, is henrique@7idiomas.com.br. So thank you very, very much for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful.
We did.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Good.
Henrique. Henrique, you
Thank you.
got 1 minute to answer a very difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara asked you, since we live in a country where there is a great number of people without access to internet, how can we make digital literacy more inclusive? What do you think we can do to reach a higher number of students?
Yes, that's indeed a very interesting and important question. I think, first of all, what we can do is think about the different kinds of digital literacy. So if we are working with, for instance, information literacy, students don't necessarily need to have access to technology to develop that. So they can analyze printed materials or maybe an anecdote given by the teacher, and they can develop critical questioning about that. For instance, that's something that can be done. Yes. But yes, it's really difficult. For instance, how do you help students deal with remix literacy? They wouldn't be able to work with videos from YouTube, but maybe collecting pictures in magazines, etc. The digital literacies are not, of course, they are digital, but they do not originate in technology itself. So there's a lot we can do to help students develop digital literacy despite of technology. Yeah.
All right,
That's
Henrique.
a difficult question. I would
Yeah,
need
it
a lot
is a
of
difficult question.
a lot
Yeah,
of time, but
we
great
we
question.
could have a whole session on that question, right?
Sure thing. Yeah.
Yeah, Henrique, thank you very much for your participation.
Mm-hmm.
Just a curiosity, what time is it there?
Let me check. I don't know. I think it's 1 in the morning.
Okay, so thank you
Yes.
very much for being here with
Thank
us
you.
on this Monday morning.
Yeah. 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 It was lovely.
Um, Thank you very much.